طيب, let's go ahead and begin. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين, والصلاة والسلام على سيد المرسلين نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحابته أجمعين, وبعد. We had reached to Salat al-Maghrib, if I'm not mistaken, in going over the times of Salah. Let's see, Bismillah. Oh, perfect. Naam. So let's pick up from there. So Salat al-Maghrib is 3 rak'ah, as you know. It begins once the disk of the sun has set beneath the horizon, and its time, according to the Mu'tamad, ends when the redness in the sky has disappeared, meaning that the effects of the sun rays are gone, and the only thing that remains is a light or a semi-light blue that precedes the darkness entering. Tamam. Now, Imam al-Shafi'i, and this is the Qadim, in the Jadid, he actually held the opinion that it does not have an ending. Maghrib does not have an ending. Then when does it end for Imam al-Shafi'i in the Jadid? And as a reminder, for Imam al-Shafi'i, there's two types of opinions, Qadim and Jadid. The Qadim are his opinions that he stated before moving to Egypt in the late 199 Hijri. That's when he moved. He went to Baghdad for the third time, and he was there for around a month. And then on his way back, he changed and he moved to Egypt instead of going back to Mecca. He remains in Egypt until 204 once he passes away. Rahimahullah ta'ala wa radiyallahu ta'ala anhu. Everything he has stated after being in Egypt, or after moving to Egypt, I don't want to say after being, but after moving to Egypt, it is referred to as al-Jadid. In Salat al-Maghrib, he viewed that it does not have an ending time, rather it ends as follows. The prayer enters, I get up, I get dressed, I make wudu, and I pray 3 rak'ah and 2 rak'ah sunnah. It is done. So, getting dressed, making wudu, and praying 5 rak'ah. Ibn Hajar argues that no, that understanding of what Shafi'i said, no, that would be 7 rak'ah. Because there's an argument about the sunan. Okay, so we'll say it's 7. So 7 rak'at, me getting dressed and making my tahara, and that's it. The time has ended, and it would shift per person. In his Qadim, he said no, it ends when the shafaq goes away. Tamam, it comes in once the disk sits, and it ends when the shafaq goes away. The ashab said no. They rejected the Jadid and they went back to the Qadim. Why? For one is the evidence. The evidence leads to that. لماذا? It is a very long discussion of evidence. I don't want to get into the adilla too much, but some of the adilla just simply says, and Gabriel led me in salah at the time people break their fast. And most narrations state that. There are a couple narrations that mention shafaq, but there's a lot of khilaf on their authenticity. A secondary reason, aside from direct nusus, is the fact of the matter. Meaning, it is the reality wherever I go that there's going to be a shafaq. Some have argued that the reason why Imam al-Shafi'i changed his opinion is next to the dalil issue is that a lot of times in Egypt, in certain parts, there is no shafaq. A lot of times, not year-round. So one might argue that Shafi'i is testing the evidences, and it's not connecting. This would be similar to the incident where Sayyidina Abu Hanifa, al-Imam al-A'zam, in the issue of when do the dates start to ferment when they're soaked in water. Is it after 3 days or it's after a week? He's seeing there's no change in his view, the reality of the matter, except for after a week. So automatically for him, he's saying maybe there's something off with the narration. There's other reasons for why he had an issue with the narration, but I'm just using this as an example to this same situation here. It is possible, as some have argued, that Shafi'i is looking at the sky in Egypt and he's saying, there's no shafaq. And it's true. A lot of times, depending where you are in Egypt, for example, Maghrib comes in and out before you know it. You break your fast, and all of a sudden they're calling Aisha. It happens super fast. Even, as a matter of fact, realistically, the timing between Maghrib and Isha is so narrow, and in many places it gets even narrower. So could that be one of the ultimate reasons why Shafi'i is making this argument along with the arguments that are on the dalil? Because as I said, most of the narrations, they'll just say, when a person breaks their fast. Well, that's not giving me an indication, is it? And this is why we actually see the tabi'een approaching the Sahaba in trying to identify this more. But since we're not going over those adillah, let's just focus on the mu'tamad. The mu'tamad breakdown for the timing of Salat al-Maghrib is broken down into 7 sections. Of course, as you know, the 6th and the 7th go back to udhr and darura. And we already explained that in our last class. So let's focus on the first 5. The first one is obviously as well, waqtul fadila. And bear in mind, this is going to be the case across the board. Each one of the 5 prayers is going to have waqtul fadila in our school, even Salat al-Isha. And we'll get to a discussion, the author will cover in the book after we're done with our notes, where he says that even Salat al-Isha is recommended to pray at the beginning of the time, even though there's a hadith that say delay it. But we'll get to that, inshallah ta'ala. Next is waqtu ikhtiyarin. And when does that end? Al-Imam al-Kurdi, he says, ila, afwan, yeah, should just be, let me just double check. I think there's an issue in the notes here. Let me, 1 second. I think I have the wrong notes in front of me because I have too much of a discussion here, and I do not want to get you into that discussion just yet. Where did I put it? Allah understand. Because still, Kurdi also goes through internal khilaf, and I did not want to cover that. I guess I don't have it in these notes. All right, labas. I didn't print that one out. لا إشكال. But anyway, it's وقت يعني اختيار and وقت الفضيلة are the same exact thing due to the fact that it's very, very short. And it's وقت جواز بلا كراهة. Most of the ulama will make it the same as وقت الاختيار والفضيلة due to the tightness of time. وقت جواز بكراهة, it will just be down to the time that you'll be able to finish the prayer. And if it goes beyond that, then you're in وقت الحرمة. In وقت الحرمة. Tamam. And inshallah ta'ala, I will send you the full breakdown without any khilaf, inshallah ta'ala, just to make things easier for you, bi'idhnillah. Bihawlillahi ta'ala, on Telegram. Yeah, I forgot to print out the other paper. Next is Salat al-Isha. And Salat al-Isha, they'll say that it has 6 times. Of course, the first one is Fadila. The last 2 are going to be Darura and Udhr, and we already went over that in the first class. It's Waqtu al-Ikhtiyar. Here, there's a lot of khilaf within the school, okay? The mu'tamad is that it's till nisf al-layl. It's until nisf al-layl, midnight. Not midnight as in 12, midnight as in Islamically. So you're going to count from Maghrib to Fajr and the middle of that. وقت جواز, or let me tell you the other khilaf. There's another opinion that says إلى ثلث الليل, the first third of the night. There's another opinion that says up until the last third of the night, basically when you would begin your tahajjud and night prayers. Then you have وقت جواز بكراهة, and that's basically the time that you'll have left to actually pray. And then وقت حرمة, and that would be when you no longer have enough time to pray. And then you have a subh. A subh is 2 rak'ah, as you know. It begins with al-fajr al-sadiq. So we have two types of fajr. Fajr kadhib and fajr sadiq. Al-fajr al-kadhib comes before al-fajr al-sadiq. If you're not impacted by lights in any way, tamam, then you'll be able to see, if you're looking out in the horizon, light beam almost looks like beams of light are coming up from the ground up. Almost looks like as if sticks of light or swords of light are sticking out all of a sudden. That's called Fajr al-Kadhib. They disappear and the sun and the sky goes dark again. Then shortly after, minutes after, it will vary from country to country, from location to location. Then moments after the light starts coming up, almost as if it is like this, you see, as if you are looking at the sun rising, but it's just a light, as if a screen is being lifted up. And that's al-Fajr al-Sadiq. Now, before al-Fajr al-Kadhib, bear in mind, the sky does light up, but it doesn't look like it's coming from the ground up. It looks like it's flashes. So if you're looking carefully, you'll look. It will look almost as if it lit up and then it goes dark again, and then it's lit up and then it's dark again. But it's not coming from the horizon. Al-Fajr al-Kadhib is the first light that you see coming from the horizon, and that's what makes it confusing. The other lights don't come from the horizon. And some argue that those lights that are before Al-Fajr al-Kadhib is just an illusion. It is the quantity of stars in the sky causing your eyes to think that their brightness is making a complete pattern. Tamam. After al-Fajr al-Sadiq comes in, Fajr or Subh remains all the way until the sun begins its rise. Not until it has risen. No, it begins its rise. How many times does it have? It has 6 times. First one's going to be Fadila. The last 2 are going to be Udhr and Darura. The one before those 2 last ones is going to be Waqtul Hurma. That's going to be the time that you're unable to pray in. The one right before that is Jawaz Bikaraha, and that's you getting into the point where you only have enough time to pray in. The second and the third, the first one is going to be what? It's going to be Waqtul Ikhtiyar. And what is Waqtul Ikhtiyar? They say Waqtul Ikhtiyar is up until the sky starts to brighten. Not that it's light, it just brightens. It goes from the darkness that's there, and it brights up slightly. Then waqtu jawazin bila karaha. The ulama differed. Why did they differ? Because of the shades of light that are coming out. Many will say it's the same as waqtul ikhtiyar, and some will extend it slightly. All of this is before the sky is fully bright. If the sky is fully bright, then the sun has begun its rising, and you've already departed from the time of prayer. Tamam? طيب. And that is the full breakdown of the prayers. And inshallah ta'ala, I will send this breakdown to you in the Telegram group. Let's get back to our book, inshallah ta'ala. He says, وَالْعَصْرُ وَهِيَ الصَّلَاةُ الْوُسْطَى. And Asr, and it is Salat al-Wusta. And Salat al-Wusta is mentioned in the Quran, it's mentioned in a hadith. He says, لِصَحَّةِ الْحَدِيثِ بِهِ. And that's the hadith in Bukhari and Muslim that says what? عن الصلاة الوسطى صلاة العصر. فهي أفضل الصلوات. It is the best of prayers. Why? Because it is being referred to as al-wusta. What does al-wusta mean? It means the top, the best. تمام. وسطا لتكونوا شهداء على الناس. The best. And that's how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala refers to this ummah. وسطا. It doesn't mean in the middle. It means the best. Like in the hadith where al Mu'een, where she said that the Prophet ﷺ, if he had to choose between things, he would choose أوسطهما. It doesn't mean the one in the middle. It means the best option. Tamam. People are confusing words and assuming that means the middle path. And a lot of people will translate it as the middle path. And the middle path has its praiseworthiness, but that's not what is meant. What's meant is the best out of the options, the best out of the prayers. Next in preference is Salat al-Subh, then Al-Isha, then Al-Dhuhr, then Al-Maghrib, كما استظهره شيخنا من الأدلة. What is istizhar? Al-istizhar, it means to make something apparent. It means to make something apparent. If you are Shafi'i, you need to learn the terminology of the Shafi'iyya. Because some people will come in and they'll read the word istizhar and assume it means that he's making something apparent, or that is a stronger opinion. That's not what it means. It means after looking through the evidence is making something obvious and clear. And that's called istizhar. And a lot of times brothers ask me which books to refer back to for the terminology of the school. Some of these important books, I just brought a few off the shelf to show you. Number one would be Matlab al-Iqad. Matlab al-Iqad is a very important text that covers the terminologies found in Al-Tuhfa and in Nihaya. There are many other books than what I'm showing you. I'm just showing you some. A more recent work that was done by Sheikh Arafat al-Maqdi, تبصرة المحتاج بما خفي من مصطلح المنهاج. Very important text. I'll send pictures of these books in the chat, inshallah ta'ala. Sheikh Arafat, he did a lot of amazing research, very important research that no one else did before him. When I say no one else did before him, I mean that collecting from the different sources, analyzing what they said, and concluding, he did an amazing job there. I definitely recommend that. And this one is good. It has some, does not have that much. Tazkirat al-Ikhwan by Sheikh Muhammad ibn Ibrahim al-Aliji. It's a good book as well. There are plenty of other ones. Al-Imam al-Kurdi has a book on Mustalah ibn Hajar that was published with a beautiful edit by Sheikh Mundhir al-Ghazali just a few years ago. I think it's Samt al-Durar, its title, I forget its name. And it's a beautiful work, and Sheikh Mundhir did a lot of research on the arguments that were presented by Imam al-Kurdi and identifying certain things. For example, normally everyone after al-Mahalli refers to Jalal al-Din al-Mahalli as al-Sharih al-Muhaqqiq, and sometimes just al-Sharih. Is that who Ibn Hajar meant when he said, oh, but the Sharih said this and the Sharih said that? Who is he referring to? And there's khilaf. Some say he means al-Mahalli, some says no, he means al-Sunbati, and others said that he meant Ibn Qadi Shuhba, and others said other things. He does the research on that. So those are some important books. Of course, Al-Fawaid al-Madaniyah has some things as well by the Sheikh al-Kurdi. Also, Al-Fawaid al-Makkiyah has things as well by Imam al-Saqaf. So there's plenty of books out there where you can dive deep into the terminologies that the Shafi'iyya use. Istidhar is one of them. And it's very important to pay attention to these things. And they mean different things, even though the word looks the same. For example, if an imam says bil jumla, or he says fil jumla, those have two different meanings. Al-asah means one thing. Al-mansus means something. But al-asah al-mansus, does it mean both things, or is it a new term? Some of the imams, they'll mention their terminology, then they'll use terminology other than the terminology they mentioned. Why? And how are we supposed to understand that? A lot of times we know al-asah, al-sahih, al-adhar, al-mashhur, but then what does al-ahsan mean? What does al-aswab mean? And how are we supposed to take that? And does that mean that when they say al-ahsan, is that the mu'tamad or is that their ikhtiyar? And what is ikhtiyar, right? So we need to study these mustalahat, and if you are trying to master this book, knowing full well that it is based upon the works of Al-Ubab, Al-Tuhfa, Fath al Jawad, the works of Ibn Ziyad and Makhrama, then you need to know their terminology because their terminology will come up. So those are some recommendations, and I'll picture them for you, inshallah ta'ala. He says, وَإِنَّمَا فَضَّلُوا جَمَاعَةَ الصُّبْحِ وَالْعِشَاءِ لِأَنَّهَا فِيهِمَا أَشَقُّ. Okay, so some argued that the reason why al-Asr is the best of prayers because it's hard for the munafiqeen as well. So they took that previous hadith that I mentioned, Bukhari Muslim, and they said, well, because the hypocrites don't come out to it. Okay, well, if we're going to bring this argument, why did some of our ashab say, but out of the prayers, the congregational prayer in Subh and Isha are the best of prayers? Because when you go back to the hadith of the munafiqeen, we see that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he specifies the importance of prayer and mentioning that the hypocrites do not come out to Subh wal Isha, come out to, not pray it. But with Asr, he just mentions pray it. With the Subh and Isha, he says come out to it. So they look at them differently. They'll say, well, the prayer stand alone, the Asr is at the top. But when it comes to congregations, Al-Subh wal-Isha is at the top. Tamam? So with congregation, Subh wal-Isha are the best. Individual prayers, Al-Asr is the best. Tamam? قال الرافعي, and that's in his sharh of Musnad al-Imam al-Shafi'i. كانت الصبح صلاة آدم والظهر صلاة داود. Subh was the prayer of Adam alayhi salam. Al-Dhuhr was the prayer of Dawood alayhi salam. Wal-Asr salat Sulaiman. Asr was the prayer of Sulaiman alayhi salam. Wal-Maghrib salatu Ya'qub. And Maghrib was the prayer of Ya'qub alayhi salam. Wal-Isha'u salata Yunus alayhi salatu wassalam. Intaha. Now I want you to pay attention to something. He says what? That Al-Rafi'i said so. Let's pull up Al-Rafi'i real quick. Bismillah. I should have it right over here. Here we go. I believe it is in the first volume. Bismillah. So this is Sharh Musnad al-Shafi'i by Imam al-Rafi'i. We are going to go to Kitab al-Salah. And the reason why we're going to look, I'll show you when we get there. You're going to see something interesting. Here we go. 224. Bismillah. Here's 224. Istiqbal al-Qibla. And once we read through it, you're going to realize what I am trying to show you. And we have went over this before. I've actually sent some of you to research it and pull it up for your notes. Where do you? I have the page in the back of my memory, but of course, my memory is not serving me well right now. But where do we? Here we go. It should be right here. There's the hadith of Jibreel. Okay. Here we go. This is where I was trying to get at. Look how Ar-Rafi'i words it. وَقَوْلُهُ هَذَا وَقْتُ الْأَنْبِيَاءِ قَبْلِكَ. And the statement in the hadith where Gabriel says to the Prophet ﷺ, this is the time of the prophets before you. Because remember, at the end of the hadith, Gabriel, what does he tell him? He says, "O Muhammad, this is the time of the prophets before you. And the time is in between these two times, because the day one he prayed at a certain time each prayer, and then day two he came and prayed those same prayers at the end of that time. However, if you go back to the prayer day two, right, the second time that he came, he said then he prayed Maghrib at the same time as he did the first one and didn't delay it. See that issue? Right? That would explain Shafi'i. He's looking at the evidence. He's saying, well, they have one time. So it doesn't have a beginning and end like the other prayers. But back to our point here. So he said, oh, Muhammad, this is the time of the prophets before you. Al-Rafi'i says, we could argue that the explanation for this is that each one of the 5 prayers belongs to a prophet. And it was narrated from Aisha that the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, this is the inheritance of my fathers and my brothers. As for al-Hajira, this was the prayer of Dawood. Okay, what's al-Hajira? If you remember in our last class, I went over the 24 hours for the Arabs before Islam. And al-Hajira, here you go. I'll just pull it out for you so I can read it to you. Al-Hajira was what? Al-Hajira was the time right before al-Zahira. ثم الضحى ثم الهاجرة ثم الظهيرة. So here in this hadith that Rafi'i is quoting, the Messenger ﷺ is saying that Dhuhr, he's calling the Dhuhr what? Al-Hajira. He says, فتاب الله على داود حين زالت الشمس فصلى لله تعالى 4 ركعات. It was al-Hajira, then Allah repented or accepted the repentance of Dawood alayhi salam when the sun moved, and then he prayed 4 rak'ah. So Allah made it for me and for my ummah, so that way we can also be forgiven. ونسب صلاة العصر إلى سليمان والمغرب إلى يعقوب وصلاة العشاء إلى يونس وصلاة الفجر إلى آدم. فكأن المعنى أن كل واحد منهم صلى صلاة أو صلى الصلاة المنسوبة إليه في الوقت الذي بينه. So it's as if each one of these 5 prayers belong to these 5 prophets. This hadith, according to the muhaddithin, is a fabrication. It is what? It is a fabrication. And at the time of Imam al-Rafi'i, it was debated and heavily debated whether it was a hadith or not. It was not settled which way you would go in understanding the status of this narration. Now, the al-Rafi'i, what did he say? From Aisha, right? What did al-Millibari say? قال الرافعي. Why did al-Millibari say قال الرافعي, but al-Rafi'i didn't say? Al-Rafi'i quoted. This act, my dear brothers and sisters, is called إبراء الذمة. What is إبراء الذمة? Meaning, someone said something. I can't verify it, or I'm not certain. This is claimed to be a hadith, but I have no certainty. It's debated on. Now, I said it's fabricated because I'd say majority of muhaddithin argued to that. Okay. Instead of saying there's a hadith, instead of saying and the Rafi'i attributed it, no, he attributes it to al-Rafi'i himself. And the Rafi'i, while he does mention it, al-Rafi'i is saying we could argue for it. We already have authentic hadith that Gabriel said to the Messenger ﷺ, these prayers are the prayers of the prophets before you. So we already know that that's a fact. The argument is, how does the breakdown go? Who prayed which prayer? That's not a big deal. We don't need to know who prayed which prayer. It's enough for the fact that Gabriel said it. That's good enough for us. Al-Rafi'i is saying in his explanation, one might argue to this narration if it was authentic. Is Al-Rafi'i wrong for bringing a narration that was debated upon? No. Is al-Millibari wrong for mentioning this? No. Why? This information is not salvational based. It's not even legal. What I mean by it's not legal, meaning my following of Islamic law is not based upon this narration. It's more of a fun fact. In other words, a faqih, a scholar, might choose to mention it just for an interesting claim. Because for me, I already know that these 5 prayers prophets before us prayed them. To what extent, how many of them, which one of them prayed how many, who cares? It doesn't matter. It's not going to change anything. Now, to mention that which has been stated and narrated, it's good to know. It's good also not to know. It doesn't matter. It doesn't change the value. But al-Millibari, to avoid falling into the mistake of saying it is a hadith when it isn't, he says قال الرافعي. And by that, reading the information, smiling at the possible fact, is easier. And also, he's freeing himself. Did al-Millibari say it's a hadith? He did not. Did he say it was narrated? He did not. He simply said al-Rafi'i said. And that way he freed himself from what? From falling into the error that it is a hadith. You're reading his book, al-Rafi'i said this. Doesn't say anywhere that it's a hadith, right? So you read through this book and you are at peace the fact that you're not basing the rule on a fabrication. And that's the point. Which brings me to another thing that I've pointed out before. I'll point it out real quick again. When the fuqaha wrote a word in their books, they thought about it carefully. It's not just random writing. No, it's let me write the right thing in the right way so the reader gets the right idea and is not confused about anything. And that's what he did here. And all of the ulama do this. If there's a quote, and maybe the original source is saying it's a hadith, and I'm not really sure if it's a hadith or not, I'll just say that Imam said this. And that way, the benefit, the fun fact, the idea is given to you without attaching it to a presumed possibility that it's a narration or it is connected to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam somehow. Tamam. طيب. He says وَاعْلَمْ أَنَّ الصَّلَاةَ تَجِبُ بِأَوَّلِ الْوَقْتِ وُجُوبًا مُوَسَّعًا. Now remember when we broke down the prayers, what did we say? We said automatically the last 2 are what? عذر and ضرورة, excuse and necessity. We got that. The first one we said it's fadila. The second one we said ikhtiyar. The third one we said jawaz. Well, hold on. If I have the time of prayer and there's a beginning and an end, and I'm saying the first slot, second slot, the third slot, technically you can delay the prayer to any time within that. You know, if you're busy at work or, you know, you're about to leave and you'll be able to pray it at home at peace, you could just delay the prayer then. Then what do we call this type of ruling in usul al-fiqh? We call wujub muwassa'. What does wujub muwassa' mean? Meaning that something is an obligation upon you, however, you have this much amount of space to fulfill it in. And as long as you fulfill it in this large plot of space and time, you're still fulfilling Allah's command upon you. This is called wujub muwassa', a wasi' obligation, a long obligation, a prolonged obligation. You can name it whatever way you want. Tamam. That means when the time comes in, while it is praiseworthy for me to drop what I'm doing and pray, Allah is also giving me the allowance to wait until my nearest convenience. And I have that option. And that's mercy from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He could have said, when you hear the prayer, drop what you're doing and pray. And if you don't, then you're sinful. Imagine how hard our lives would be. Very difficult. Instead, it's wajib wujuban muwassa'an. And as the timer starts to decrease, then that obligation becomes even more a priority because I'm running out of time. And then once I get to, I only have enough time to pray, then it's jaiz, but with karaha, with dislike, with blameworthiness. And if I get to the time where the time that's remaining is not enough for me to fulfill my prayer, then it's haram now. Now I've crossed a red line. So it's like green light, yellow light, red light. Subhanallah, a beautiful setup, and it's so merciful, especially in the age of globalization where the time schedule varies. I might have school, I might have work, I might get out. If I get home, I could pray it in the comfort of my home, maybe, or if I'm a sister, or I'm gonna meet up with the brothers once we get out of school at the masjid or after work. So you have options, and you wouldn't be doing something haram. And if your situation is dire to a certain extent or extreme to a certain extent, you might get the reward of dropping what you did and going to pray due to the situation. That's mercy from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He says, فَلَهُ التَّأْخِيرُ عَنْ أَوَّلِهِ إِلَى وَقْتٍ يَسَعُهَا. You can delay the prayer until you have the max of until you're all the way at a time where the only thing that's left is the time for you to pray. بشرط أن يعزم على فعلها فيه. But when the time of prayer enters, you automatically should have the intention to pray. Okay, well, I know I'm going to pray in an hour. Then in your heart, oh Allah, I hear the calling, I acknowledge the time of prayer, I'm going to pray at this time. And that way, you are fulfilling an ibadah. The ibadah is in your heart. The ibadah is what? I acknowledge that I need to go and pray. And I will do so at this time. Tamam. And you have to do this because you're being called for prayer. All right. And if you don't, فَوَيْلٌ لِلْمُصَلِّينَ الَّذِينَ هُمْ عَنْ صَلَاتِهِمْ سَاهُونَ. عَنْ صَلَاتِهِمْ. It's not talking about individual prayers. It's talking about, in their mind, the concept of prayer is secondary. It's not a priority. You don't think about it. You don't think about it. الَّذِينَ هُمْ عَنْ صَلَاتِهِمْ. Their prayers. So it means the concept of prayer in their head is irrelevant. So in order for us to fight back and not be like that, be like the believers, don't be like the non-believers, don't be like the hypocrites, be a true believer. When the time of prayer comes in my heart, oh Allah, I'm going to pray it at this time because you allowed me to. And I'm at work and I can't get up from my desk right now. I can't leave my job at the moment. Tamam? That's called azima. That's called what? Azima. And that's an intention before you actually do the act. It's called an intention, a niyyah, when you are at the start of doing the act. وَلَوْ أَدْرَكَ فِي الْوَقْتِ رَكْعَةً لَا دُونَهَا فَالْكُلُّ أَدَاءٌ وَإِلَّا فَقَضَاءٌ. And if you were held back, and by the time you got to the prayer, you prayed a rak'ah, a full rak'ah within the time, then the entirety of your prayer is called what? Is called ada. It's you fulfilling the command. If you can't get at least a rak'ah within the time, and the rest of the prayer is all outside of the time, then that's called qada. It's called a makeup. Performance on time has a greater reward than makeup. تمام? ويأثم بإخراج بعضها عن الوقت وإن أدرك ركعة. And one can become sinful by delaying the prayer where some of it will be outside of its time. Even if a full rak'ah was done in the time, that would be you performing, but you're sinful for delaying. Of course, unless you have what? An excuse. Unless you have an excuse. نعم. لو شرع في غير الجمعة وقد بقي ما يسعها جاز له بلا كراهة أن يطولها بالقراءة أو الذكر حتى يخرج الوقت وإن لم يوقع منها ركعة فيه على المعتمد. If a person begins the prayer, تمام, and there was enough time for them to fulfill the prayer when they entered, when they started. And this is all the 5 prayers except for the Jum'ah prayer. Tamam? And we're going to have a whole section on Jum'ah, don't worry about it. Also, I have received a couple questions from brothers and sisters in regards to excuses. We're going to have a whole segment on excuses where we're going to speak about excuses into the finest points, inshallah ta'ala, and necessities, the a'zar and the daruriyat, inshallah ta'ala. There's a long list. We're going to go over it all, bi'idhnillah ta'ala. So in the 5 prayers, I delayed it to a time where I know normally I can finish the prayer in this time. It takes me 30 minutes to pray. I said Allahu Akbar, and there's still 30 minutes. Tamam. So I know I'm going to finish the prayer. But then I got to my reading and I was like, I'm feeling like Al-Baqarah today. And I kept on going and I lose track of time. Tamam. And I'm still in the first rak'ah and the azan for Asr calls. Did I fulfill this prayer on time? The answer is yes. Even though it went beyond, yes. Tamam. Even if it went what? It went beyond. You're considered you fulfilled because you started in time. فَإِن لَمْ يَبْقَ مِنَ الْوَقْتِ مَا يَسَعُهَا. But if there's not enough time for you to finish the prayer, so there's like 5 minutes left, and you know it takes you more than 5 minutes, then you're not allowed to prolong the prayer. Your prolonging at that point would be what? Sinful. It would be sinful. أو كان الجمعة, or if it was a Jum'ah prayer, you should not extend the Jum'ah prayer, especially if you're that far into the day past the time. Tamam. If you do that, or if the time of Asr comes in and you're still in the Jum'ah prayer, you're to finish it al-Dhuhr. Khalas. It would be what? It would be Dhuhr. ولا يسن الاقتصار على أركان الصلاة لإدراك كلها في الوقت. It is not sunnah. It's not recommended. As a matter of fact, most of our ashab will say لا يجوز, of only doing the pillar acts. And we're going to speak about this a little bit more once we get to excuses, inshallah ta'ala. Now, if you remember in wudu, we said if you're running out of time, you can do every act once. You could even do the pillars of wudu only, tamam, due to a time constraint. And we gave examples when we covered that there. Can I do the same in the salah? The Mu'tamad says no, it is not sunnah to do that to the prayer because the prayer wind up looking like something else altogether. Tamam? Let's check our time. No, ممتاز. He says, فرع يندب تعجيل صلاة. It is recommended that all prayers be prayed immediately as soon as the time enters. And I mentioned that when I gave you the breakdown for the times of the salah, I said the first one always going to be what? وقت الفضيلة. He says, ولو عشاء لأول وقتها. Even صلاة العشاء. لخبر أفضل الأعمال الصلاة لأول وقتها. Hadith is in Abi Dawud. If you're listening to the Abu Dawud classes, second class, my commentary is coming up. Sheikh Abu Yunus just uploaded the next section. So the hadith says what? The best of actions is praying the prayers at the beginning, first entry of their time. That would include what? That would include Salat al-Isha. But what about the hadith that says that the Prophet ﷺ used to delay? The Prophet ﷺ even said, I would delay. We can understand that, and our ashab have understood it in many different lights, many different ways to look at this. Tamam. The most famous one is he was talking about it in light of the munafiqeen, the hypocrites. Some said, well, it's in light of its proximity to Maghrib causes confusion. A little delay is helpful. So there's so many different responses to it. And it's not really documented that the Prophet ﷺ really did that often. Yes, there's a couple incidences documented, but the overwhelming evidence shows that he prayed Isha at the beginning of its time. Now, he said, I would, but he didn't, not consistently. Yes, we have the famous hadith where, I believe it's the hadith of Anas ibn Malik radiallahu ta'ala anhu, where he said the Prophet ﷺ would have us wait for Salat al-Isha, and some of us would fall asleep sitting up. And we Shafi'is use that hadith to say that sleeping sitting up does not break your wudu, because he would say that the Prophet ﷺ would come and we would rise and we would pray and no one would make wudu. So we understood that from sitting there, falling asleep, you do not have to redo your wudu. Your wudu is fine because you fell asleep sitting up. We spoke about this already. Well, what about the delay? Well, that delay could have been a test for the hypocrites, because the Prophet ﷺ emphasized the fact that the hypocrites do not come out to pray Subh and Isha in Jama'ah. So he could have been delaying it as a test for those hypocrites. How is it a test for the hypocrites? Well, for one, we as a community know who the hypocrites are because they're not coming out. Right? Right. Well, if that's the case, right, then it's not that it was never meant to delay Isha itself. And again, it's a matter of debate. The four schools differ on this. Even within the Shafi'i school, some of our ashab differ on this. But the mu'tamad is that even Isha is to be prayed at the beginning of its time. He says, وَتَأْخِيرُهَا عَنْ أَوَّلِهِ لِتَيَقُّنِ جَمَاعَةٍ أَثْنَائِهِ. تمام. You can delay a prayer, not just Salat al-Isha, but a prayer, to later on in its time, waiting for the congregation to get together. تمام. وَإِنْ فَحُشَ التَّأْخِيرُ مَا لَمْ يَدِقِ الْوَقْتِ. And the ta'khir, the delay, can be extraordinary, as long as you do not depart from the time, meaning you don't get to a point where you don't have enough time to pray the prayer in. And that's really across the board with all of the prayers. Tamam? And you see what he says? He says, what? لِتَيَقُّنِ جَمَاعَةٍ. Because you have certainty of jama'ah. Many of our ashab said the reason why the Prophet ﷺ was delaying is so that way he can make sure everyone can make it. Last prayer of the day. Let everyone make it, especially if they were fasting. It's going to take a minute by the time you eat. Make your wudu, then make your way to the masjid. Today it's a little bit easier. We have tall buildings. We can just go down the elevator, go down the stairs. But they didn't live on top of each other. They lived on the ground, on a flat surface, right? So me walking to the masjid might have been a 20-minute walk, a 30-minute walk. From Maghrib, and they were just there in Maghrib, one might easily say the Prophet ﷺ was just doing that to bring ease to the community. Think about it like this. You came, you broke your fast at home over a couple days, you came to the masjid. All right, whether it was a little bit before Maghrib or right after Maghrib, came in to join a Jama'ah. Okay, well, it took you 20, 30 minutes to get there. 20 minutes to get back home after Maghrib. Guess what? Aisha is about to come in. So the delay at the time of the Messenger sallallahu could have been just simply for the community. And we can still do that today. Based on the community, and we know their schedule, the imam could say, all right, we're going to wait for 30 minutes and then have the jama'ah. We can wait for 45 minutes and have the jama'ah. If you go to your local masjid and look and see when they actually do the iqamah, you'll see that Salat al-Maghrib is the shortest one between the adhan and the iqamah. Most masajid will say the adhan and then just say the iqamah and pray right away. Most masajid in America, they do that. Why? Because of the short duration that's in Salat al-Maghrib. قال ولظنها إذا لم يفحش عرفا. Because the first time he said what? You're certain that the congregation is getting together. He said, وَلِظَنِّهَا. And if you assume that the congregation is going to come together as well, as long as the delay is not that bad. لا لشك فيها مطلقا. However, if you have doubt that the congregation, there's even going to be a congregation, the congregation is actually even going to come together, then no, you can't delay. You need to pray right away. And that goes back to the group of people praying. When they say congregation, they mean more than one, more than even two people. Tamam. So say there's two people there in the masjid and they're like, okay, well, let's wait for 30 minutes so that way people can make it in. That's fine. Tamam. He says, وَيُؤَخِّرُ الْمُحْرِمُ صَلَاةِ الْعِشَاءِ وُجُوبًا لِأَجْلِ خَوْفِ فوت حج بفوت الوقوف بعرفات لو صلاها متمكنا. نعم. The muhrim should delay Salat al-Isha so he does not miss al-wuquf bi-Arafah. Tamam? If he prays it at its normal time. لأن قضائها صعب. This is a larger mas'ala. It's connected with several other masail of unifying, delaying, and praying immediately several different prayers throughout Hajj. Inshallah ta'ala, when we go over a chapter of Hajj, we'll get down to a little bit more depth as well. وَالصَّلَاةُ تُؤَخَّرُ لِأَنَّهَا أَسْهَلُ مِنْ مَشَقَّتِهِ. A prayer can be delayed due to the presence of hardship. So if there's mashaqqa, if there's hardship, you can delay. And see, look, he's not even saying excuse. I know I use the term excuse a lot, but when I say excuse, that can be translated in Arabic into two different types of things, mashaqqa and udhr. Normally when I say excuse, I'm just saying, it just means mashaqqa, it just means hardship. We will cover those differences when we get to the full list of mashaqqa, al-a'dhar al-'amma, al-a'dhar al-khassa, and al-daruriyat. Hardship, general excuses, that'll be things like bad weather, personal excuses like having to stay with an elderly relative and you can't leave their side, and necessities, which would include things that are blocking you and stopping you, like menses for our sisters, or me being traveling and I'm not able to move because I'm in a bus or in a car and I can't get up and make my ruku' and sujood. Tamam? وَلَا يُصَلِّيهَا صَلَاةِ شِدَّةِ الْخَوْفِ. Now, when you have hardship and excuses, you don't pray the prayer in the same description as the prayer of fear. Prayer of fear, or also known as battlefield prayers, have different descriptions, different methods. You might face other than the qibla, you might not do ruku' and sujood, and so on. It can be prayed off of the battlefield. When we get to that section, we'll go through all those different types because the Prophet ﷺ, he prayed in three different main types. So the Imam was standing behind the soldiers, and sometimes the Imam is in front of the soldiers, and the soldiers take turns in which rak'ah they're praying with the Imam. So there's a whole method for that. So in order to avoid confusion, we'll leave that section for there. But when you have a hardship and an excuse, or even a necessity, a darura, you do not switch to battlefield prayers. Battlefield prayers essentially should be left for the battlefield, and in certain situations, you might use them, which we will explain. We'll have a whole section on that in the chapter of prayer. ويؤخر أيضا وجوبا من رأي نحوي. I mean, he could have said من رؤية نحو غريق أو أسير لو أنقذه خرج الوقت. Meaning, I have enough time to pray. Now, I was working at a store on the beach, and I walked over to the beach and I see someone drowning. Do I stop and pray, or do I swim out to them? I know by the time I swim out to them and rescue them, the prayer is going to leave its time. Yes, you're going to go ahead and do what? You're going to delay the prayer, even if it's going to go outside of its time, because you're saving someone's life. Or someone is being taken away unjustly. So our brothers in Gaza, they see someone being taken, and if they intervene, they might be able to save them. Now, if they know that their intervention will not save them, then we would say no, then just pray. But if they know if they intervene, they could save that individual, then they should go and save that individual. Tamam? Let's check our time real quick so we don't go over. 4 minutes. We can go over this last one and then we'll stop right here. Where he says, فرع ويكره تحريما, which is the prohibited times. And the prohibited times we're going to be speaking about independent prayers and dependent prayers. Okay, it's going to be, there's going to be a tight breakdown, and then we're going to go over each prayer. Is it dependent or independent? And what does that even mean? But here he says, فرع, subsection. يكره النوم بعد دخول وقت الصلاة. Okay, before the time of prayer enters, you can go to bed. You want to take a little nap, you want to close your eyes. Why would we say openly, just like that, you can go to bed? Because it's not an obligation upon you unless the time comes in. And when the time comes in, it's a open obligation. You have a duration of time to complete it in. Yes, once it comes in, the timer starts moving. But before the time even enters, there was no obligation upon you. So I can't, as a person of fiqh, come and say, you sleeping before the prayer comes in is haram. I don't have any right to say that. Why? Because is there an obligation upon him right now? No, not until the time enters. So that talk about, it's haram to go to bed before the time of prayer. There's no justification for that. There's no legal precedent for that. Now, if the time has entered, we're going to say, if the time has immediately entered, we're going to say it's makruh for you to go to sleep. Tamam? وَقَبْلِ فِعْلِهَا, unless you pray immediately. Then you can go to sleep, and there's no problem. حَيْثُ ظَنَّ الْإِسْتِيقَاظ, the karaha, the dislikeness here is if he assumes that he would wake up قبل ضيقه لعادة أو لإيقاظ غيره له, because they know they only sleep for like an hour and then they get up. It's makruh. It's not haram, since they know they're just going to sleep for an hour. So Dhuhr comes in, we'll say at 1, مثلا, and the person is like, I really want to take a nap. Okay, you can take a nap, but it's disliked that you do so before praying. Tamam? He's taken up and he knows that he's going to wake up in an hour, or he knows that if someone comes around, they're going to wake him up before the timing gets to the point where he only has enough time to pray in. وَإِلَّا حَرُمَ النَّوْمُ الَّذِي لَمْ يَغْلِبْ فِي الْوَقْتِ. Now, if he does not know that he's going to wake up, he might fall asleep and wake up 6 hours later, 5 hours later, and he has no clue when he's going to wake up. He has no assumption. He has no one to wake him up. He doesn't set any alarms or anything like that. Then it's haram for him to go to sleep, because he's in the time of prayer. Tamam? Now, so here we're going to stop at the times that it's prohibited to pray. Now, is this prohibition just simply a dislike, a blameworthy, or is it sinful? Is it haram to pray in these times? And which prayers are haram to pray? That's what we will start with, inshallah ta'ala, in our next class. أقول قولي هذا وأستغفر الله تعالى لي ولكم فاستغفروه إنه هو الغفور الرحيم والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.